Being a night for the hardcores, and thank you for being here this evening. I will get to some serious stuff in a second, but there was just a lot of other weird stuff that happened today that I thought I might begin our conversation with tonight, including if today felt just a little bit different than every other day, if you felt like you had not enough time to get around and do whatever it is that you did today, well, guess what? You are not incorrect, because a very strange scientific reason means that today, July the 9th, is the shortest day in the history of the world. Apparently, it is 1 nanosecond shorter than the average day because of the rotation of the Earth and apparently the fact that the planet is getting ever so slightly smaller. Again, the explanation that comes here via an American news website, I think this one, yeah. Earth is expected to complete a full rotation on the 9th of July at roughly 1.3 milliseconds less than the standard 86,400 seconds that define a 24-hour day. With that time difference, imperceptible to humans, it does represent a broader pattern that has left scientists scratching their heads for years. After thousands of years of the Earth slowing down, Earth has been spinning faster in recent years, constantly breaking records for its shortest days. Now, again, if you felt like today just was a millisecond faster, everything was a little bit, yes, because of the Earth's rotation and it getting smaller. I told you it was a weird day today. As I mentioned, can you believe there is a government anywhere in Australia that would tell you how much time you have to spend playing with your puppy? Well, that is apparently exactly what the ACT Parliament is seriously considering. Dog owners must spend 3 hours minimum with their pets under a new proposed animal welfare law. Now, I have again, this is one of those things where, and all of us care about animal welfare, and all of us want to make sure that the pets and puppies and budgies and fish and all the rest of it in our lives live great lives, okay? No question about that. But how are you supposed to prove it? Are you supposed to somehow sort of like the old punch-in, punch-out clock? Are you supposed to put a stepper on Rover? Is a council ranger going to follow you around? This is one of those things where it will be a recommendation. But if it's going to be potentially enforceable, how will it ever be enforced? The ACT government, and I know there are a lot of good people who watch us in the ACT, but the joke still stands. In terms of its government, it is much more like a local council than it is a state parliament. Obviously, the Northern Territory has fewer people, but a much bigger area. But certainly of the territories and states, it's small. And sometimes its priorities, in my opinion, are also a little small, okay? Now, again, have a look at this. Under the draft Code of Practice for the Welfare of Dogs in the ACT, features a number of mandatory standards, including restricting surgical debarking, good, that's weird, and making it compulsory for owners to provide animals with human contact for a reasonable length of time, 3 hours minimum. Now, again, the code will include guidelines, blah, blah, blah. And apparently you have some issues around retractable leads. Again, just think this through for a second, okay? Now, if you've got like a really active dog, you might be able to get 3 hours of cuddle time or walking in. Okay, fine, fair enough. What do you do with a rabbit? What do you do with a snake? And who's going to police this? Believe it or not, a great free thinker that is John Roscombe has a strong opinion about this because he sent the story to me to talk about when we have a chat a little bit later in the show. A passionate pet owner himself. How would he feel about a government or somebody following you around with a clicker telling you whether it's okay or not to spend more time with your pet? Fair dinkum. All right, third silly story around today. And again, there's lots of stuff, but come on, you deserve a smile every now and then. This one involves two of the world's biggest diplomats. Well, one of the world's biggest diplomats and Penny Wong. Penny Wong is, of course, our Foreign Affairs Minister. The American version is the Secretary of State, who is Marco Rubio. Past couple of weeks, they ended up having a meeting together, but as the way the world works, they're obviously in contact, plenty of, little messages and all the rest of it, and whatever secret mobile phones that they use. Well, according to the Washington Post today, somebody has been an imposter pretending to be Marco Rubio and has apparently been trying to call people in the American government or foreign ministers around the world and pretend to be Marco Rubio. This was the detail from NBC when it was primetime news, because, of course, somehow it links to Orange Man bad. But, of course, it has nothing to do with them. It's an imposter who somehow has got the numbers of the people that would be in his phone and had been reaching out. Was Penny Wong one of them?
The actor used AI to contact at least 5 high-level government officials in mid-June, including 3 foreign ministers, a governor, and a member of Congress.
Please go on.
The individual using the display name Marco.Rubio at state.gov also left voicemails on the messaging app Signal for at least 2 targeted persons.
So, is Penny Wong one of these people? Now, they had a very recent meeting. They clearly were preparing for the meeting. But what I find really interesting about this is by choosing to say nothing, what is going on here? In the Australian newspaper, their version of the story today, the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, has declined to comment on whether she was one of 3 foreign ministers contacted by artificial intelligence with somebody impersonating the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. When asked whether Senator Wong had been contacted by the imposter over the encrypted message Signal, which is basically another version of a WhatsApp, right? A spokesperson, we're in 2025, declined to comment, citing the ongoing investigations in the United States. Now, I get it. These people are all very sort of super careful and they don't want to say. But if it wasn't you, you just say, no, of course not. But thanks for the inquiry, but no, I'm not one of them, move on. And it's a crazy story, right? Okay, this is national security stuff, but encrypted apps, people end up with people's numbers. This is not a giant surprise, right? Thankfully, it's not somebody turning around knocking on a hotel door in the middle of the night or going to their house or something more physically dangerous. But with the greatest of respect to Marco Rubio, it did get me thinking. Let's just imagine that Penny Wong was one of the ministers who was contacted. Her public presentation is fairly robotic, a little bit AI, dare I say. And Marco Rubio, again, at times can be a little AI. So we decided to use AI to try to show the speech bubbles of what their conversation would look like. The problem is, would either of them have known that it wasn't a real person on the other end of the line? Oh, how dare you say that? Penny Wong's a national treasure. Now, increasingly, not a day goes by without someone in the left turning around and basically saying, hey, you know, China, let's do more of what they do. And I've spoken 1 trillion times for all the obvious reasons about why that is a terrible idea. I don't want to be more like China. I'd be more like America, the UK, New Zealand, free countries, right? Not China. Well, today, the boss of the Energy Council was giving a speech at the National Press Club. I know. Were you watching too? Now, normally I would not care at all about presenting you what the Energy Council boss was saying at the National Press Club because he was saying all the obvious. Well, this in part is what he said today. China plays as a team, essentially kind of saying it's good the way they are dealing with climate change issues, even though we know they're the world's biggest polluter. This is in part what this bloke said. He is the boss of the Smart Energy Council, okay? So he's better than you and I, and he knows more about the future than you and I. And unbelievably, he said this, and there was not a gasp in the room when he said it.
One thing you can say about the Chinese system is that China plays as a team.
They don't play as a team. The Chinese government, not the Chinese people, nor the citizens here in Australia, no, you're not going to get me on that one. It is a ruthless machine that, as you saw back in 1989, will put tanks in front of protesters, let alone people in jail for invented crimes. The idea that you would be able to launch a protest about any planned mass development in your part of China, good luck. You will be depersoned within a moment. And depersoned does not mean not allowed to use Twitter, okay? I don't care if it's a joke. I don't care if it's flippant. How can you say this? Unbelievably, there was plenty more that he had to say about China. In fact, it was kind of on his brain today.
And Australia spends all of our time trying to tear each other apart. That is no way to compete for Team Australia.
Okay. In a free country, you are allowed to disagree with your government. You are allowed to disagree with your fellow citizens. You are allowed to do so out of principle, out of opinion, out of because it's Tuesday. Okay? That's our country. You are allowed to say, I don't like what is happening. In this country, we tear ourselves apart. Not because, and they all want to pretend that this is, we're still 20 years ago and there's a conversation about whether climate change is or isn't a thing, right? Australia needs to do our bit. Why? Because all the evidence is there about what's happening to the world. But Australia's 1% of the global problem. Yes, a certain section of the country, last election would tell us about a third of the country, doesn't agree with what the government's plan is, which is to move from an energy system that has worked for decades, that was cheap for decades, to a new one that, fingers crossed, after it's built, after it's paid off, will theoretically be cheaper. But there are plenty of people who quite reasonably have come to the conclusion that the amount of cost and effort of the new system doesn't do as good a job as the old system. And that, yes, while one is going to be more polluting than the other, the new one requires how much bush to be cut down, how many new wires to go up, how many new farms to essentially just be trampled, China style. This bloke said China over and over and over and over again in his speech today. And again, I don't know whether this is I've never heard of this bloke before, okay? And I know because I'm nipping at his heels, he'll be roll gold now on the ABC, okay? The official sort of, tick of approval. You've annoyed the people in Sky News Primetime. But these are the people that are not just lobbying our governments, but are being given front and centre at the National Press Club. That's the same place the Prime Minister has given speeches, the same place. Eminent Australians have given speeches. Yet again, no gasp, no reaction. I guarantee this will be the most chat about it that you're probably going to hear. But if you get a chance, go back and watch the tapes, read the transcripts. Of course, I don't need to point out, but I will. When it comes to China and specifically renewable energy, when it comes to renewable energy products that are made out of China, I hope this bloke and everyone else who thinks, why can't we be a little more CCP, remembers the Uyghurs. The Uyghurs is a religious minority in China, 1 million of which have been imprisoned, and among other things that they are doing when the females are not being assaulted in horrific ways, that far right-wing institution, the BBC, remember, tells us that the Uyghur population is being used as forced labour, slave labour, to make solar panels, the same ones we import into this country. This is such a problem that even Joe Biden, who didn't even know what day it was or what city he was in, when he was president, banned the importation of slave labour solar panels. Australia has not made that decision. And when it comes to China and China being able to solve the global problem, remember, as I've told you before about the climate clock, right? Let's go like play school. You can get from here to about 1:15, and that's China. This is the rest of the developing world or the global south. This is India. This is the United States. This is Russia. 45 of the 60 minutes of countries, if it was a clock, are either completely out or don't care about net zero 2030. China pollutes what Australia does in 1 year in 16 days. We should be more like China. They all pull together. This is truly outrageous, but what a little insight into how they truly think and what they truly think of people who stand in their way. And they're not saying that because climate change is an existential crisis and anyone who is slowing us up by a day is committing our kids to horrible futures. No, it's because there's plenty of money and then there are valleys and then there are hills. And again, about China, they are currently at a 10-year high for the amount of coal power plants they are currently producing. I had a look on one of those lefty websites that is all very pro, massive things to do with renewable energy. Have a look at the graph. There's the past 10 years. The red is just how much new coal construction, new, not ongoing, new coal power plants. Last year, a 10-year high. Oh, but we should be more like China. Actually, go back. Can we play it again? Play again the very first bit of this guy from this council and his view. You know, like remember when Tony Abbott would talk about Team Australia, just backing in the awesomeness of Australia and doing your best for Australia. Oh, pilloried, and how many things were written in all of those opinion pieces everywhere? Well, how many will be written about the bloke who said this in our national capital today?
One thing you can say about the Chinese system is that China plays as a team.
You know, I want to say more, but we'll get to it in a moment or two's time. Now, as you know, climate change is the obsession of certain parts of the left. The reality for the extreme majority of Australians has been how much everything costs. It always has been. Ever thus, if you've ever had a bill, we've always had that part of our lives where we're going, geez, what's all this about? Well, the reality is that cost of living was a major issue. 2/3 of Australians, either by first or second vote, decided to vote for the government to stick around. But of course, all of the indices that come out tell us that apparently cost of living crisis is totally over. I mean, just listen to the Prime Minister and the snake charmer.
Cost of living.
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 Ah, but they think we've turned the corner, you see, so it doesn't matter anymore. And as I told you a couple of nights ago, almost half of all of the economists that the price comparison website Finder got in touch with said the cost of living crisis is over. Well, isn't that excellent news? You might want to tell that to the people who responded to another consumer website survey, because cost of living is triggering mental health issues for millions of Australians. Now, I know I talked about it for months, talked about it for years. Oh, there he goes again. Oh, whenever he talks about money, it's boring. Well, I just think when you get information about average Australians, regardless of whether they vote left, right or centre, whether they are of all genders, all political persuasions, all football teams, no football teams, that it's a relevant story. Again, we have a look here. Almost half of Australians admit cost of living pressures are impacting their mental health, as millions were denied further relief when it came to the interest rates this week. Fresh research from, now I know it's kind of Pond's Institute, but you get the point, Compare the Market, found 48.7% of Australians now experience or have heightened feelings of anxiety, depression due to money issues. So you can stick it where the sun doesn't shine that, half of the economists say because this indices and that indices and the 1.2 and the 4.5 and the minus the 2 and everything's okay here in the chairman's lounge. Seriously. Remember, inflation may well be 2%, not 6%, not 4%, and that's great. But when you put together this month's increase to that month's increase to this year to the year before, it's like this. You know it, you're living it, and the prices will never come down. Why? Because, for all the obvious reasons, if anyone can make a buck, they'll keep making a buck. Can we go back to the statement here? Gen Z was fearing the worst when it came to the price pressures, as 72% of respondents in the comparison site's survey reported mental health strain as money woes, over money woes. Millennials followed with 56%, saying they felt mental health challenges over the cost of living pressures, while 48% of Gen X and 29% of baby boomers feel the same. Oh no, but it's all okay. We've turned the corner. It's over. I get it. Look at the scoreboard. They won 94 seats to 4/5 of bugger all to the opposition. But this is not about the election. This is about our country. And this is about our media who just want to move on in many ways from these things. And I get it. It's not a university study. It's not a plebiscite or a referendum. But still, how far away could you possibly be? Half of all of economists, they turn around and say, we've turned the corner. The crisis is over. Whereas the numbers, as I just told you, generation by generation, 72% of Gen Z is feeling anxious about money. 56% of millennials, 48% of Gen X, and 29% of baby boomers. I would call that more than half of the country. Let's talk about the piece of work that was Jeffrey Epstein. What a story this has been. What a wild ride. Now, you don't need me to tell you, but this bloke was a piece of. This is a bloke who wasn't kinky, he was a creep. Now, it has been officially ruled that he killed himself in a New York jail. The guards just fell asleep at exactly the right time and the camera cut out. Yeah, but that's what the official story is, okay? And forgive me for wondering out loud whether you believe that or not, but that is the official line, just like the magic bullet and JFK, right? Well, the issue that many people have been discussing since he was arrested was, okay, the way this bloke used to live his life was he used to hang out with really rich, really famous, really important, really powerful people. And there were many ways that you could hang out with him. You could come over to his house, you could fly on his plane, the Lolita Express, or you could, of course, go and spend a couple of nights at Jeffrey Epstein's island. In all of those locations, there have been allegations about underage girls being procured for sex or sexual interactions in all three of those locations. So when the kingpin falls, a lot of people were wondering, okay, so when's the list going to come out about all of the people who may well have been to those three things and may or may not have done what he did at one of those three locations? Of course, it was the Epstein list.
They include associates, friends and alleged victims of the disgraced billionaire who died in jail 5 years ago.
The pages revealing around 150 people mentioned in previously redacted parts of the Ghislaine Maxwell suit.
More than 200 previously redacted names linked to Jeffrey Epstein have been made public tonight.
A federal judge ordered the unredacted documents to be released last month.
So there is a list? Well, apparently not, because the FBI, the Department of Justice and Trump's administration have now turned around and said there is no list. Now, of course, one of the reasons why some people were looking forward to a Trump administration was this list that we'd heard about how many times from different places that would come out. Now, for anyone who says, well, obviously the reason it didn't come out is because Donald Trump's on the list. You don't think that Joe Biden and his staff, if Trump was anywhere near the list, would not have been linked or leaked or all the rest of it? But the official decision today is there is no list.
A new Justice Department memo reveals that the Justice Department has no evidence that convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed powerful people or kept a client list.
Investigators say they found no incriminating client list of Epstein's, no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, and no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties.
Axios obtained a memo from the DOJ that concludes Epstein did not have a client list and that he died by suicide.
Nothing to see here. Remember that movie Men in Black where they hold up the thing and they go, boop? Oh, I don't remember anything. That's the trick they're trying to pull. Now, either there never was, which means everyone's been lying for all of this time, but nobody has come out to ever correct the lie and just let it run and run and run and run and run. But of course, if there was no list, if there was no information, all of those media outlets that I showed you before that would have been loyal to the Biden worldview, well, they would have repeated, there's nothing to see here. But the lady who became the Attorney General in the United States, thus the person who became in charge of the Department of Justice, with responsibility for people like the FBI, well, she has kind of been saying pretty clearly that there was a list. Here she is, I think about 4 months ago.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that. I'm reviewing JFK files, MLK files. That's all in the process of being reviewed because that was done at the directive of the president from all of these agencies.
So have you seen anything that you said, oh my gosh?
Not yet.
But that wasn't the only time she talked about it. In fact, a few days later, they actually got a whole bunch of influencers who had interest in this from the incident, gave them a whole bunch of binders. There was nothing new in any of it, but there was this big song and dance. And she said this on television, remember, as the person in charge of the very body that could tell us whether there was or wasn't a list. Second example of her saying there is well and truly a list.
What you're going to see hopefully tomorrow is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information, but it's pretty sick what that man did.
Recue that grab. Let's play that again. Lots of names, lots of details, okay? Again, no wigs or words here. Expectations, right up to here, that there's documents you've never seen because the list has been hidden for all the obvious and spooky reasons. What did she say again?
What you're going to see hopefully tomorrow is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names, a lot of information, but it's pretty sick what that man did.
So over the weekend, they decided to go to sort of an inside baseball Washington news thing called Axios. And they said, there's nothing more to see here. Nothing happened. So the past couple of days have been weird watching people go, sorry, what? You said all of that. You said all of that. I didn't say that. You said all of that, right? You're the one who didn't just set expectations, but kind of was pulling the horse to water, and the horse was thirsty to know what was happening. Well, today there was a cabinet meeting in Washington, D.C., of course chaired by President Donald Trump, who wanted to, magically pretend no one wants to talk about this. And I like Trump, but come on.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
But eventually, the person who said everything that you've heard before, the Attorney General, she had to speak because she couldn't quite scarp her off. She's sitting right there. You don't leave if the president hasn't left, and everyone's sitting down and there's no escape. So what did she say today?
I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, it's sitting on my desk to be reviewed, meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be child porn downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child porn is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day.
Okay, but you would have known that, right? Like first week in the job, first month, let alone the release of the pump up and all the rest of it. One person left on the planet, may one day tell us whether there is or isn't. It was his girlfriend. Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, is in jail, and rightly so, and she will be for the best part of 20 years. Why? Because she went and found the underage women who were then subsequently abused by Jeffrey Epstein. But listen to some of the media reports at the time. Does she know more? Well, you make up your own mind.
Prosecutors say that she recruited and groomed 4 girls between 1994 and 2004 for Epstein, her longtime associate and former boyfriend.
Maxwell was convicted of helping to recruit young girls to be abused by her longtime associate, Jeffrey Epstein, back in December.
Ghislaine Maxwell has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually abuse teenage girls.
The former socialite, who counted royalty as friends, has been jailed for 20 years for conspiring with Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse young girls.
I love motorsport. Supercars is my love, but second to it is the world of Formula One. And what a massive story in that sport. I know a lot of people in Australia, well and truly, we stay up in the middle of the night to watch everything from practice all the way through to races. Saturday nights qualifying around 11 o'clock is always amazing to watch. And the Red Bull racing team has been a phenomenal one for the past 20 or so years. In fact, of the more than 400 races that they have competed in, they've won at least a quarter of them over the entire 20 years of it being in place. This year, however, the form has started to fall away. Just 2 years ago, they won all but one of the races that entire season. Max Verstappen is, of course, the driver who has won them many a world title, and apparently was so unhappy with the way things were going that maybe, just maybe, he was going to go off to another team. So we learned tonight that his boss, Christian Horner, the very man who put the team together, built it, took it to not one but multiple drivers' titles with multiple drivers, multiple constructors' championships, is gone, out. Is that because Max is going somewhere else, or is it because they need to get rid of him to keep Max? Suffice to say, the news has been massive. The statement from Red Bull tonight was breaking news all over the F1 world.
Red Bull's Chief Executive of Corporate Projects and Investments, Oliver Mintzlaff, has had this to say about Horner. We would like to thank Christian Horner for his exceptional work over the last 20 years. With his tireless commitment, experience, expertise and innovative thinking, he has been instrumental in establishing Red Bull Racing as one of the most successful and attractive teams in Formula One. Thank you for everything, Christian, and you will forever remain an important part of our team history.
Now, I know there's been scandals in the past. My view is that I reckon that it is all about keeping or after they have lost Max. So we'll find that out in the next little while. Martin Brundle is, of course, the legend of motorsport from the UK. He's the guy who is in the commentary box each and every one of those sessions that we stay up in the middle of the night to watch. And he is a very passionate motorsport, not just fan, but also person who's aware of the success and British-based success of Christian Horner. This is what he said to Sky Sports in the UK.
I'm quite sad about it, if I'm honest. I consider Christian a friend, and he's done an incredible job there for 20 years. Won an awful lot of races and world championships for drivers and for the team, and he took it from what was the Stewart team through Jaguar, and it was struggling to a massive campus in Milton Keynes and an awful lot of success and a huge trophy cabinet. So, but it's not been difficult to feel in the Formula One paddock and to observe and to hear that things were not particularly rosy.
Look, I know they're all very well paid, but how brutal can sport be? And it's one of the reasons I love motorsport, in that there is no grey area. You win or you lose. 2 years ago, they won all bar one race. 2 years later, the bloke who built the team, hired all of the right people and won so many titles, gone.